Welcome back once again. Andrew from the Revisionist Almanac here, and it's time to get into the final part of this three-part special where I count down my top 50 favorite action movies of all time. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, be sure to hit pause on this. Go back and listen to everything that was on the list at numbers 50 through 11, and then come back here afterwards. I also received my first piece of hate mail, so thank you to that person that sent that over through email last week. It would be absolutely no fun if we all agreed on our movie opinions. So seeing someone so passionately against one of my selections, I guess tells me I'm doing something right. And with that out of the way, let's get into my top 10. At number 10, there have been several movies on this list that have raised a few eyebrows with listeners, but this one might just take the cake. Rarely does a kick ass action movie also have incredible song and dance numbers, but that's what makes this one so special to me. It's 2022's RRR, directed by S.S. Rajamouli. Now, it would be impossible to describe just how much sheer joy this movie brings me. It was a complete surprise the first time I watched it, having no idea what to expect, and I think I've now seen it 6 or 7 times at this point, and my love for it hasn't diminished at all. It's an epic in every sense of the word, with a truly incredible story, weaving in bits of Indian history, and giving us two superhero level lead characters that Marvel would be jealous of. The chemistry is out of control between N.T. Rama Rao Jr. and Ram Charan, maybe the best bromance ever put to film. The action is over the top, and it just brings a smile to my face. Moving to number 9. We will stay in Asia for this next movie pick. It's one of the first epic action films in cinematic history, and it just so happens to be the winner of the revised Best Picture prize from the third episode of the show back in March. We are up to Akira Kurosawa's 1954 classic, Seven Samurai. This movie is the blueprint for all films that feature a large ensemble cast of characters that come together to take down a villain for the greater good. Just think of Japanese black and white Avengers if you're not familiar with the movie. It's potentially Kurosawa's defining film in a career littered with masterpieces. It might be 3.5 hours long and feature an assortment of sweaty ass cheeks, to quote a past guest of the show, but this movie expertly builds over its runtime until culminating in a final hour that, in my opinion, rivals anything in the action genre. Number 8. It actually pained me to have this movie so low in the top 10, but here we are. Now, I teased it on the last episode, and we are now to the second James Cameron movie, which makes my list. I am, of course, talking about 1991's Terminator 2 Judgment Day. This movie was the action film of choice by friend of the show and future season 2 guest Adam Freed, who you can find at Movie Archer on Instagram. In the previous episode, I mentioned my love of James Cameron twisting the Alien franchise from horror to action during his sequel, but I think what he did with his own Terminator franchise from the first to second movie is more impressive. Now, while the first Terminator movie is much more akin to a horror film and Arnold is playing an outright villain, the sequel turned things upside down by creating a storyline where Arnold became the hero out to help save John and Sarah Connor, as well as trying to save humanity itself. The movie boasts remarkable action set pieces and a new, more dangerous and evolved villain, the T-1000, played expertly and coldly by Robert Patrick. Some may prefer Titanic, some may prefer Avatar, but for me, Terminator 2 Judgment Day is the movie James Cameron should be remembered for most when it's all said and done. At number 7, we are now up to yet another movie that has featured on one of the past monthly episodes of this show, and just like Seven Samurai, it also won the revised Best Picture Oscar, this time in 2010. I'm talking about the mind-bending Christopher Nolan film, Inception. Now, Nolan has a habit of taking his action films and wrapping them around narrative stories that are sometimes too hard to comprehend. I'm looking at you, Tenet. But Inception is really the sweet spot for his mashing of action and heady plots. The entirety of the action in Inception happens in various levels of dream states, but that doesn't take anything away from what Chris Nolan was able to craft visually speaking. If anything, it only allowed him to turn the dial up on what could be done. And on top of all the amazing action that happens inside Inception, The story of Leonardo DiCaprio's character trying to complete his mission, return to his children, and bury the guilt of his past is what has made this film so enduring over the last decade and a half. The movie also delivers one of the top endings to any film in recent memory, and is one that is still being debated online among movie fans. At number 6, from one film that makes you question reality to maybe the defining one of its kind, it's the Wachowskis' 1999 kung fu inspired film, The Matrix. Now, I have seen a recent troubling wave of complaints from young movie fans who seem hell bent on saying The Matrix is overrated. To those people, hopefully some of which might be listening right now, I say to you that had you lived through the release of this film, you would fully understand how big this was on the cultural landscape of the world. Keanu Reeves was already an emerging action star at this point in the 90s, coming off both Speed and Point Break, but his turn as Neo blasted him into a realm of true superstardom. The Wachowskis also implemented a new type of directing style to the action genre, notably their use of slow motion and bullet time, which were copied by anyone and everyone in the early 2000s, hoping to capitalize on the success of this film. When it comes to a scene in The Matrix that best illustrates the action greatness, it would have to be Neo and Trinity having their shootout with a legion of enemies as the two desperately try and save Morpheus late in the film. It was one I would go back and watch over and over again as a teenager, and watching it recently, I was struck by how well it has still held up. At number 5, Christopher Nolan is back again, this time with not only one of the great action films ever made, but also one of the great superhero movies the world has seen. It's the second film in Nolan's Batman trilogy, 2008's The Dark Knight. The movie opens with a flurry, borrowing elements of Heat and Point Break, both previously on the list, with an exceptional bank heist and an introduction to the now legendary Joker, played by the late, great Heath Ledger. From here, Christopher Nolan puts together a perfectly paced and deeply satisfying story for the Batman character, featuring several remarkable action moments, including the car chase near the end of the film. While I personally believe there has been a superior Batman film made, yes, I'm talking about Matt Reeves' 2022 The Batman, that film is far more into the noir style and the detective work of the Caped Crusader, while Nolan's Dark Knight is the quintessential superhero action movie we might ever see on screen. 16 years after the movie was released, and it's still just as revered today as when it came out. That for me is a true testament to the power of the film, the character, and the brilliance of Heath Ledger individually. Moving on to number 4. Let's talk for a bit about Quentin Tarantino's bloody revenge action flick, 2003's Kill Bill, Volume 1. There were 2 social media friends who told me this was their favorite in the action genre. First up was Anand Singh, who you can find at Geek of Hollywood Cinema on Instagram. And the other was one of my favorite people, a guest on the 1954 episode earlier this year, novelist extraordinaire V.P. Morris. And while I'm mentioning V, she will be back in the fall this year for another episode where we'll be talking about the 2015 year in film where Spotlight won Best Picture. I typically like to think about the Kill Bill movies as one entity, but for the sake of this list, I decided to separate them out. The second part is far more about the story of how Beatrix gets her revenge on Bill, but part 1 is all about her slashing and gashing her way through her kill list, culminating in the insane and over the top violence that takes place as she battles Go-Go, the Crazy 88s, and eventually Lucy Lou's O-Ren, where this movie becomes an all-time action feast. Uma Thurman also rocks a sick yellow jumpsuit, channeling the spirit of Bruce Lee, and creates perhaps my favorite female character in any action movie. We're at number 3. Hold on to your butts for this pick. We're getting prehistoric with the action for this one. It's 1993's Steven Spielberg masterpiece, Jurassic Park. Is this dinosaur-filled movie fitting of the action distinction? Perhaps not for everyone, but I very much classify it as an action-adventure movie, making it more than eligible for inclusion in my list. Jurassic Park is one of my earliest movie memories. I distinctly remember sitting in the living room of my parents' house at around the age of 9, popping in the bright yellow VHS tape and being taken into a world of cinema that completely blew my mind. By this point in his career, Steven Spielberg was already a complete and total master of the craft, creating a perfect blend of awe inspiring scope, humor, horror, and adventure. And when you look at how large this IP has become over the last 30 years with prequels, sequels, Lego, video games, apparel, and everything else under the sun, Jurassic Park's legacy is cemented in the world of film, and I don't anticipate it falling out of my top 5 action movies anytime soon. Up to number 2. It's no secret that I consider Steven Spielberg the greatest director of all time. And while I love Jurassic Park, which was the previous movie on the countdown, this is what I consider his singularly defining film. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark, which by the time you're listening to this might just be winning its online voting poll for 1981, where I picked it as the best film of that year. From the opening scene and the now legendary moment where Harrison Ford is chased out of a temple by a giant boulder, this movie set forth a new standard by which all action adventure movies would be judged. There's not really that much to add to the discussion about this film beyond what I already said on the 1981 episode, which you can check out for yourself. Shameless plug. Indiana Jones is an all time great character, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my all time favorite films, not just in the action genre. It never gets old. Even when Hollywood tries milking every last ounce out of the franchise, like the disaster that was The Dial of Destiny, this movie belongs in a museum. And we have reached number 1 on the countdown. With 49 movies behind us, we arrive at the grand finale. The action movie of all action movies. A movie fueled with the adrenaline and high powered guzzling. It's George Miller's 2015 film, Mad Max Fury Road, the king of the road on my list. My love for Mad Max Fury Road really knows no limits. When the movie came out in 2015, I had zero expectation for it, and I went to see it in an IMAX on a whim. It was one of the great holy shit moments I've ever experienced in my life. After seeing it for the first time, I made it a point to try and go as often as possible with as many friends as possible, seeing it in every format available, including 3D. In total, I saw Fury Road a half dozen times in the theater during its initial run. I purchased it on DVD and then Blu ray as soon as they were available. I've read the book about the making of this movie, which is the stuff of legend. When you look up action movie in the dictionary, they should just have a picture of Mad Max Fury Road. It is without question the greatest piece of action ever filmed for me. Now, this concludes the series, but once I am able to see Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, I will be sure to put something up sharing my thoughts on it, and if it came anywhere close to the greatness of either The Road Warrior or Fury Road, both of which were on this list. I hope you enjoyed listening, and while you're here, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, as well as rating and reviewing the channel on the podcast platform of your choice. Did you like what was on this list? Or do you think I had things placed way too high or too low? Be sure to reach out to me on any social media platform at RevAlmanac with your feedback or email the show at revisionistalmanac@yahoo.com. I will also be doing more of these countdowns that coincide with new movie releases, so be on the lookout for those over the rest of 2024. Until next time, I will see you later.